어느 날 아담이 자고 깨어나는 사람처럼 눈을 떴습니다.
At the appointed time, Adam opened his eyes as if he had just woken up from the last night's sleep. He was in the middle of a green grass field and began to look around in all directions. And thus began his life. Humans didn't get to watch God's creating actions on the first day, the second, the third, and the fourth. They came to know about God's created world as God told them.
자다가 아침에 깨어나는 사람처럼 깨어나서 모든 것을 둘러봤어요. 하늘을 쳐다봤습니다. 그때
When Adam first opened his eyes and looked into the sky, it was not blue like ours, it was white.
그 하얀 하늘에 아름다운 노을이
In that white sky was a reflection of a beautiful sunset. The sky was white because there was another layer of water above the sky. When viewed from below, this layer appeared white. Furthermore, the Garden of Eden was full of flowers and beautiful birds.
형용할 수 없는 식물들이
The garden was beautiful, full of exquisite plants and animals which were bouncing around as if in the clouds.
그곳에서 모든 것이 스스로
Every creature experienced its own inherent joy. They didn't have to make efforts to find happiness, as joy naturally sprang from their hearts like the morning dew. Joyfully, Adam went around here and there, taking walks and exploring.
뛰기도 하고 만져보기도 하고 그 아름다운 향기를
The world began with Adam running, touching, and savoring the enchanting fragrances. Thus began humans' first experience of the world.
이렇게 태어난 아담은 완전한 사람이었습니다.
Adam was created as a complete being.
이 모든 세상을 보여주면서
God showed Adam the world that he created and began to talk to him about it.
봐라, 저 높은 하늘.
Behold, I spoke everything into existence. The lofty heavens, the vast wilderness, and the majestic mountains.
첫째 날에는 내가 빛을 만들었어.
On the first day I said, light be, and it was so. On the second day I created the waters and separated them into two layers, one in the sky and one in the below. On the third day I created the land and the seas. Then I called into existence lush vegetables and plants on the ground for humans to consume.
그리고 제일 마지막 날에는 내가 흙으로
Lastly, on the sixth day, I formed you out of clay by my own hands. I breathed life into you through your nostrils. And God told Adam about his work of creation. Then God said, you are my son, distinguished from all other creatures. Adam thus began his life as God's child. He listened to God and saw everything as God showed him.
정말 그 천지 만물에는 하나님의 신성과 아름다움이 충만하게 그려져 있었어요.
In all creation, in the heavens and the earth, God's divinity and beauty was richly expressed. If we could see this world in the fullness of God's Spirit, we would be able to notice this world reflecting God's magnificent beauty. God said to Adam, I am the Lord, the one who created all of this, and I freely give you everything as a gift. He then declared, I bless you. You shall have dominion over all these things to conquer and to rule over them.
내가 이 땅에 모든 이 온 땅에 나는 모든
I give you all the beautiful plants in the land. You shall have them for food. Eat, be satisfied, strengthened, and enjoy life to the fullest.
그렇게 아름답고 자유로운
Run through the fields like gazelles and live in freedom. Then you will come to understand
내가 얼마나 너를 사랑하는지 이런 것을 알면서 너와 나는
how beautiful I am and how much I love you, to know me and be one with me. God bestowed such a beautiful life upon the first human.
가보고 싶지 않으세요?
Don't you wish you had seen this It's a lost world to us.
하나님이 창조하신 모든 것들 중에서 가장 아름다운 존재가 아담이었어요.
Adam was the first magnificent
다른
creature.
모든 것들은 말씀으로
God created everything into existence by His spoken word, except for Adam. For God formed Adam out of clay using His hands. Then God breathed into Adam His breath of life, thereby making him a living being. Adam was the most beautiful creation with no need for clothing.
없어서 못 입은 게 아니라 너무 완벽한 아름다움이기 때문에 더
It was not because there was a lack of clothing, but rather because Adam's perfect beauty required no adornment.
흙으로 만들었기 때문에
Being formed from the earth, his body was of a rich, dark hue, brilliant and captivating.
그리고 아담의 마음속에는 이런 형상으로 충만했습니다. 사랑,
Adam's heart was endowed
세상을 정복할 수
with
있는
love,
용기,
wisdom, and courage to
자비.
rule the world with patience and compassion.
이 형상은 어디서 나왔죠? 예, 이 밝고
Where did
아름다운
these
형상은
qualities originate? These bright and beautiful qualities reflected God's own nature.
그런 사람,
God endowed Adam with his own qualities. Therefore, God said to Adam, Adam, I created you in my own image.
너는 나를 대신해서 이 모든 세상을 다스릴 거야. 이 땅은 내가
You will
창조했지만
govern this world on my behalf. I bless you to rule over the earth which I created. And God gave the world to Adam with abounding generosity.
하나님이 아담을
Now, could you see how much God loved Adam?
인간은 이렇게 거대한
Such was the gifted condition in which God intended human beings to thrive in life.
아담은요.
Adam was originally immortal.
만약
If you were to
죽지 않는다.
never die, how would you behave? Would you slide down from tall mountains on a rope?
안 죽어요, 우리는.
You wouldn't die, would you?
처럼 날아서
You could fly downward like a bird and dive into the sea. Wherever Adam went, God's hand was with him. When Adam played underwater, teeming with fish, God's hand guided him. That's why Adam didn't die or get wounded. Originally, death was not to be part of his experience. He was incomparably perfect and lovely.
그렇게
Adam was happy. He gazed upon the spectacular sky and admired the enchanting flowers. But we can hardly imagine that world now.
우리가 사는 세상은
It is not like the world in which we now live. So much of that world was damaged at the time of Noah's flood and continuously being damaged by humans through time.
그런데 그 세상은 얼마나 아름답겠습니까?
Yet even with just a fragment remaining, you can see how remarkable and beautiful it still is. Could you imagine how much more breathtaking Adam's world was? One day God said to Adam, Adam, you may eat from every tree in this garden, including all its fruits. Eat to your heart's content.
왜요? 했더니 저거는
But do not eat from the tree in the center of the garden. And then Adam asked, why? And God replied, it is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. At that moment, Adam heard from the first time the words good and evil. Was Adam good? Was he evil?
만들어진
He was neither good nor evil.
아담이 살고 있는 세상.
Adam was as he was made. The world in which Adam lived was simply filled with love, without any distinction between good and evil. Such concepts did not exist. So where did good and evil exist at that pristine time?
그때 쓰는 도구였어요. 하나님만이 갖고 있는 지혜였습니다. 아담에게 필요했을까요?
It was an instrument God used to judge the evil spirits. It was God's own wisdom. Was it necessary for Adam to possess this knowledge? No. Therefore, Adam was unaware of the distinction between good and evil. He didn't understand its meaning, but God said to Adam, do not eat from that tree, for if you eat from it, you will surely die. So Adam promised to not eat of it. there was no room for compromise in God's command. For He clearly said, if you eat its fruit, you shall surely die. So Adam accepted it with an amen. This was the first covenant between God and humanity. What is the title of this talk? This is the first of the storyline of the biblical covenants. You might think that the introduction is too lengthy, but God has made a covenant with human beings. You might take it for granted. But think seriously. God is the creator. Adam was his creature. Would you exchange a promise with your pet dog?
차원이 다른 존재이기 때문에 그래요. 우리하고 동등한 인격이 아니기 때문에 그래요. 아무리 이쁘고 아무리 사랑스러워도
No, because human beings and animals are qualitatively different. They're not equal. No matter how lovable, we can't make a covenant with them. Without God's endowment of special status, Adam was just a clay-made figurine. Yet, God made a promise to him and so dignified his personhood and status. God addressed himself as I to Adam. God addressed Adam as you, establishing a personal relationship with him. Isn't this grace? Being made of the dust of the ground? Shouldn't humans prostrate before God and thank Him? All things created by God can only exist in their creatureliness. A rock is forever immobile in its own because God created it to be so. God created some creatures to move by crawling on the ground, and so shall they be forever. The same is true for flying creatures. All creation exists according to the way that God created. However, Adam was uniquely created because he was created to live by the choices he makes.
거역할 수 있게 된 거예요. 약속을
He was endowed with the ability to disobey because Adam was in a covenantal relationship with God. He could choose to keep the covenant or not.
스스로 선택해서 사는 삶. 이거 보면 뭐라 하죠?
He was given the ability to make personal choices. In other words, he had freedom.
이 세상에 자유를 누리는 유일한 피조물. 그게 아담이었고
Adam was the only creature to enjoy freedom. He was a human. Adam's obedience to God would be by choice, not compulsive. Life as such would consist of exercising his free will.
자, 똑같은 행동을 해도 내가 스스로 선택해서 하는 행동.
Doing the same action but choosing to do it freely, such life could bring true joy and satisfaction.
북한에서도 일은 했고요.
I started working in North Korea and continued to work in South Korea.
내 의지와
Yet in North Korea, I was forced to do it regardless of my will or desire.
거기 만족도 없고 즐거움도 없었어요.
So I felt no satisfaction or joy. But here in South Korea, however, I choose to work. So work brings me much joy. Even though I work more, I feel so joyful and fulfilled. More importantly, since I'm doing what I've chosen to do, who should be responsible for the results?
북한에서 우리 결과를
It's mine.
내 것이었나요?
Back in North Korea, Kim Il-sung took credit for what we achieved. So we didn't care about whether the results were good or not. As such, our lives were gloomy. We lived like slaves and animals, but a life based on self-determination. Your own life.
내가 생각해서
To whom did God grant the ability to think, judge, and choose?
아담에게 준 거예요. 이것이 없다면
Adam.
아담은 뭐가 되죠?
Without this ability, what would Adam be? The same
안에서만
as the
살아가는
animals.
아무것도 아니고
He would be reduced to living in his instincts,
한없이
devoid of personality, but he was created to be a noble and precious being. Who then should bear responsibilities?
그때부터 아담은 그렇게 잘 보이는 동산 중앙에 있는 나무를
With free will, Adam was conscious of the tree located at the center of that garden. The tree was unmistakably visible to him. Adam didn't have a house to live in, and hence no windows either. In the morning he would wake up, but choose not to eat from that tree. Why?
하나님께 순종하고 싶은 마음에 이 아름다운 세상을 선물로 주신 하나님.
Because he loved God. He desired to be obedient to him. Adam was grateful for the beautiful world that God has gifted him. Therefore, he decided not to rebel against God. Hence, Adam chose to live in freedom, a life of happiness, dignity, and contentment.
이 새로운 신분, 자유를 누리는 아담에게는
As a free man, Adam manifested authority. Everything created was under Adam's authority and obeyed
모든
him.
것들이 복종했어요.
Adam, as the child of God, the king over the earth, possessed a dominion that extended as far as the lofty heavens and the vast earth.
아담처럼 높은 권세를
No human apart from Adam has ever possessed such high authority over the entire world.
정말 이
If not for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, Adam could have mistakenly thought of himself as an immortal God. However, as Adam stood before this tree, he was reminded of his creatureliness.
한계가 있는 존재야. 무릎 꿇어.
The tree had a didactic purpose. You are not the owner. You are a finite being. Kneel before your God. You belong to God. You mustn't forget that. So it was the limitation God had drawn for Adam's sake.
하고 존귀한
Was
만큼 그 피해도
the tree
치명적
necessary? Yes. Its absence would be detrimental to Adam.
선물했습니다. 자유를 선물했고
The tree of knowledge of good and evil presented Adam an extraordinary life, the gift of freedom, dignity, and ability to live a life of self-determination. Would you like to receive the same gift? To us, God grants us two choices. If God had only given us one path, we would have no choice to make. Our lives would be driven by fate. But God created us to make a choice between a narrow or a broad path, blessings or curses.
네가 해라.
Each of us must choose, just as God had presented to Adam or to Israelites. God, through Jesus Christ, presents to us the same conditions.
왜? 우리에게 뭘 주시려고요? 자유로운 인생을.
Why? To give us what? God's will
그래서 우리는
is to give us a life of freedom. By exercising this gift, we become noble beings. So will you still complain about the tree of knowledge of good and evil? The problem was not the gift of free will, but the misuse of it.
아담은 모든 것을 다스렸어요. 그런데 어느 날
Originally, Adam ruled over everything.
아담이 명령하지 않은 일인데 이런 일들이 일어나는 거예요.
One day, animals began to gather in front of Adam, even though he hadn't summoned them.
하나님이 아담 앞에 동물들을 쫙 사열에 세우는
God had summoned all the animals together in front of Adam, saying, Adam, you shall rule over them, therefore give them names.
아담 거니까 내 거니까 네가 이름을 명명하라는 거예요.
Adam was given the opportunity to name them.
아담이 마음속에 그 지혜와 총명의 영이 얼마나 충만한지
He was full of wisdom and
하나님의
intelligence.
영이 충만하니까
As the Spirit of God filled him, he instantly comprehended the essence and purpose of each creation, enabling him to naming them promptly.
결혼해서 애를 낳아본 사람들은 알아요.
Married couples who have children can appreciate how marvelous naming can be. I couldn't name my own daughter, even though I have, earned a graduate degrees. Ultimately, someone else named her. So I realized how difficult it is to name things, and that the task requires profound wisdom and knowledge.
아담이 우리하고 동일한 지능을 가진 존재.
Had Adam's intelligence level been the same as ours, he wouldn't have been able to keep up with so many different names. But he named millions of species of animals without confusion. At a first glance, Adam knew what each one was because his spiritual and intellectual capabilities were great. and he conversed with the triune God as we talk with one another. Adam's eyes were open to spiritual beings, able to converse with them. The visible and invisible dimensions of the world was not yet divided, existing perfectly as one.
그래서 안 보이는데 아담은 그때 모든 것을 보면서 보이는 세계도 보고
Therefore, Adam could perceive both the visible and invisible worlds, living in communion with both. Doesn't this seem truly mysterious to us? Then could we also see how profoundly humanity has been damaged? One day Adam felt tired. It was his first time.
졸려 이렇게 자는데 얼마나 깊이 잠드는지
He also felt sleepy. He fell into a deep slumber, unaware of his rib cage being opened.
진짜 하나님이
A bone was taken out of him, but he was still unaware.
갈비뼈가 하나 없어졌어요.
Truly, it was the work of God through which one of the ribs disappeared.
갈비뼈 하나를 취해
God covered his body again and used the rib that he had taken out of Adam and fashioned another human.
나타난 거예요.
And a fairer woman appeared lying on a field of green grass.
누워 있는 거예요. 재료가 뼈니까 이번에는 하얀색 사람이 나타난 거예요. 하얀 여자가 나타난 거예요.
And she was taken from a bone, so her skin was fair. She woke up as if she had just gone to sleep the night before.
이 분이 깨어나서 제일 먼저 본 게 뭐냐면
And she opened her eyes and began to look around in all directions.
기록은 안 했는데
When she awakened,
어떤 것과도 비교할 수 있는
the first thing she saw was God. Although this part is not recorded, she must have beheld the image of God, which is incomparable to anything else in this world. God was the first to look into after the creation. Nothing was more beautiful than God.
빛나는 점.
Just as Adam had done when he first opened his eyes, she too looked around. A radiant being who was watching her came over and quietly led her somewhere. Then she saw a dark, luminous figure gazing at her. His eyes were fixed on her.
왜? 아담은 맨날 보던 하나님이니까 평범하잖아요.
Why did he stare so intensely? It was ordinary for him to see God, but this time there was a fair-skinned, swan-like person next to God. Adam was so filled with the Spirit of God's presence that he said, "You are taken from man, you shall be called woman."
딱 보는 순간 알아요. 이게
He recognized her instantly because he was wise and intelligent.
정말 충만하다는 게
God's
보이죠.
wisdom indwelled him
두 분이 다
abundantly.
옷을 안 입고 있었거든요. 그래서
Both were
벌거벗은 두
naked.
남녀가 이렇게 만났는데 우리처럼 음욕을
Yet they did not feel lustful like we would. Instead, they experienced a boundless joy. These two individuals were not like us.
아름다운 여인을 보고
When Adam first met this lovely woman, he was so elated that he sang a song.
완벽했던 인간이 처음으로 여인을 보고
He was the most perfect man spiritually and intellectually.
우리 그 노래 알죠?
Upon seeing her, he serenaded her.
살 중에 살이라.
We know the song, right? He sang, "You are bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh." The first time I saw these lyrics, I thought, how truly beautiful. The first man creating such a beautiful song. God could have created the woman from the dust of the earth.
그럼에도 불구하고 왜 아담의 뼈로 만들었냐면
But he created her of Adam's rib because he wanted them to be united as one. So that humans can be one. So God created the entire human race out of one couple.
서로 다른 존재
Two distinct individuals becoming one in love. This is part of what it means to be made in God's image.
자기들의 형상을 투영해서 만들었잖아요. 모든 것들을. 그래서 인류도 그렇게 설계를
Humans were created to reflect the image of the triune God. They were created as relational beings who could cultivate joyful relationships with one another. That's why God first created Adam and then Eve next. Adam, having experienced aloneness, was delighted when Eve came, but Adam changed afterwards.
그 전에 아담은 눈만 뜨면 하나님 찾았거든요. 하나님 찾고
Before he sought after God, the moment he opened his eyes, Adam used to seek after God, whether, he ran to the mountains, dove into the sea, and wandered through the valleys. He was always with God. But now, he no longer sought after God. He wanted Eve's company during day and night. Wherever he went, he clung to Eve. Yet God looked upon them with great joy and delight. So he said, a man shall leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. With this command, God structured human society. So Adam lived with Eve from then on. Adam had already named everything.
이름을 가르쳐 줘야 되잖아요. 그래서 하와를 데려다니면서 모든 걸 또 가르쳐요.
To converse with one another, you must share information. So Adam taught Eve all the names he had given. Eve remembered them well, for she was equally intelligent as he. When they came upon the center of the garden, he said, Eve, this is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You must not eat from it. And she wondered what was meant by good and evil.
대답 못하고 그냥
She asked Adam, what they meant, but he didn't know either. He just said, you can die if you eat from it. You might wonder why I am talking about something that is not explicitly written in the Bible. I'm making an inference from Eve's answer to the serpent. For she answered, you will die. Eve was not yet able to lie. She would have told what she had heard. Who did she learn from?
아담이 이렇게 가르친 거예요. 이게 아담의
Adam. Herein was Adam's fatal mistake, because the reason why God had forbidden Adam to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was not because of death.
왜 먹지 말아야 되냐면 하나님과 약속을 했기 때문에 먹지.
Rather, Adam wasn't supposed to eat from it. It was because of the promise he had made with God. Death was the result of breaking the promise, not directly issued from the fruit itself. Let me explain. Why won't you eat a poisonous mushrooms? Because you'll die. What if you had a medicine that could neutralize the toxin in the poisonous mushrooms? Even if you ate it, you could avoid death, right? Back to Eve. Well, Eve thought that, if we could eat from it, but not die, it will be okay to take its fruit. For she wasn't taught the real reason.
죽기 때문에 먹지 않는 게 아니라 왜 먹지 말아야 되죠? 약속을 했잖아요. 안 먹기로.
For Adam, he had made a promise to God to not eat from it. The implication was spiritual, not physical. It was not like a poisonous mushroom to be avoided. The fruit would have tasted good.
이런 영적인 의미를 가진 나무인데 마치
But the tree had a spiritual meaning and consequence. But Eve was taught as if the physical property of the tree would kill her upon eating its fruit. Even though Eve possessed perfect beauty and intelligence, she didn't know thoroughly the promise Adam was made with God. Yet it was essential for her to know it perfectly to keep the promise.
어느 날 하와가 에덴 동산을 이렇게 걸어 다니는데
And one day, as she was strolling in the garden, the serpent appeared. And the serpent was not like the snakes we see today. It was Satan. The devil took the form of a serpent when appearing to humans. Therefore, the Bible refers to him as the serpent. That day, so Satan appeared to Eve in the form of a serpent, but with 4 legs. Satan, appearing in the form of a serpent, engages in conversation with Eve. Its goal was to tempt Adam and Eve to sin so that it can devour them. The only way for them to commit sin was by breaking the promise, as it was the only way to sin to enter.
그래서 이거 허물어야 되는데 하와한테 가서 이렇게 유도 질문을 해요.
The serpent approached Eve with a leading question. Did God really say that you must not eat from any tree in the garden? And Eve responded, no, we may eat from all the trees except for the tree in the middle of the garden. If we do, we will die.
이 말을 뱀이 들은 거예요.
The serpent immediately discerned that Eve didn't know the promise fully.
약점이 치명적인 약점이 드러난 거예요. 그러니까 뱀이 그 미혹의 능력이 구름처럼 일어나서 하와를
It recognized Eve's exploitable vulnerability. The serpent wrapped her with delusion, clouded her judgment, and said, Eve, when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened to know good and evil.
그 눈으로 이렇게 봤더니 정말 그래 보이는 거예요. 아담이 해준 말 있잖아요.
Then you'll be like God, knowing good and evil. Now Eve could see what the serpent was talking about. Remember what Adam had told her. You will die if you eat from it. But the serpent had just told her, you will surely not die. She was faced with two contradicting pieces of information, and she was gifted with free will to decide. She chose to believe in the serpent, so she ate from the forbidden fruit.
먹었는데 죽어요, 안 죽어요?
Did she die? It wasn't pointless.
진짜 안 죽었단 말이에요. 그러니까 누구 말이 맞아요?
So she didn't die. So whose words were correct? The serpent's words. Objectively speaking, the serpent's words were true. Then Eve rushed to Adam. I've eaten it. She also relayed the serpent's words. Eat this and we will be like God, knowing good and evil. Now Adam also ate the fruit.
흙으로 만들어
They were created from the dust of the earth to rule over the beautiful world created by God. Now they wanted to be like God.
그걸 먹은 거예요. 이거 반역입니다. 그냥 실수로 먹은 거 아닙니다, 여러분.
In eating the fruit, they committed a rebellion, not a mere mistake. They deserved to be killed. Anyway, Adam didn't die either. It seemed like the serpent was correct. Thus they transgressed the boundary that God had set for them. Now, if God were to keep his promise, they should surely die. But no immediate death came upon them. So whose words will they believe in? They began to believe in the words spoken by the serpent, the devil's lies. On the surface, the sin that corrupted the entire human race occurred so ordinarily, almost uneventfully. But internally, a war began to wage from deep within their minds. Where God had occupied became infiltrated by the unbelief planted by the serpent's words. Wisdom disappeared, foolishness, despicableness, and cruelty began to set in.
뱀의 형상으로 바뀌는 거예요, 인간이. 마음속에 있는 형상이. 다 하나님이 주셨던 그 아름다운 형상은 다 사라지고.
Humans began to resemble the serpent's image. The beautiful image of God began to diminish, and the serpent's image began to set in through conflict and pain. Ultimately, the serpent's words were established in the human mind, creating a new belief.
그랬더니 믿음은 인간을 지배하는 가장
Faith or belief is the foundational strength of humans, but the human mind began to change. Wisdom began to diminish, courage disappeared, and so did patience.
인내도 사라지고 가장 처참하게
The most severely damaged was agape love. They began to have a new perspectives based on the words planted by the serpent and saw things never seen before. Even though they had never seen anyone clothed, they now realized their nakedness and felt shameful. What was once beautiful now seemed repugnant. When serpent's delusion invades our mind, every judgment becomes upside down. What once seemed good appears to be evil, and vice versa. Their bodies that God had created so beautifully suddenly looked vulgar to them. So they began to cover themselves with leaves. But does this act of covering make any substantive change? Adam was once so wise, but now he has become foolish. Whereas he once loved and revered God, now he resented God. Their eyes opened, they said, until now God withheld this knowledge from us and allowed us to roam naked. From now we will cover ourselves. But which is more beautiful, the body covered with flimsy foliage or its original form? Such was the serpent's power. Such is the frightful power of deception. We will finish here today In conclusion, unless we teach correctly, learn correctly, we cannot protect or preserve ourselves. We must know the truth to keep the truth.
진리가 생명이에요.
And the truth is life.
오늘 무슨
What
실수를
mistakes
봤어요,
did we see today?
잘못
Adam made the mistake of not teaching Eve correctly or fully.
인간은 이렇게
We were all in Adam, so we all walked the way of rebellion in Adam, having been deceived by the devil.
기도할게요.
Let me pray.
하나님,
Dear God,
우리는 바르게 배우고
we will learn correctly.
제정신으로 똑바로 배워서 진리를 알아서 이 진리를 지키고
We will stay alert.
하나님과 우리 사이에 맺어진 약속이 무엇인지
God, we know the covenant made between you and us. We will keep it, guard our lives. In Jesus' name we prayed. Amen.